Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dr. Maggie Wray here with Creating Positive Futures Academic Coaching, where we help students develop the time management, organization, and study skills that they need to earn better grades with less stress. And a huge part of stress for most of our students is the college process. That is why we host this series every summer, Your Teen Ready for College, and we help try to connect you all with people who are in this field, who are in this space every day. They're helping students navigate this process. They're helping parents figure out how to do this. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of stressful information. There's a lot of overwhelm out there about, oh my gosh, my kid's never going to get in and I don't know what to do and I don't know how to approach this. So we want to help you all understand the questions to ask, the steps to take. And in particular, one of the stressful pieces I find for a lot of students is the college essay. That is a type of writing that is unlike anything they've really ever done before. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to approach it. Or they think it's going to be no big deal and it'll be just like every kind of writing they've ever done. They're going to just dash something off, and that essay doesn't really reflect who they are in the best possible light. So I'm really excited to be here today with Ethan Sawyer, who's going to be talking with us about how to create an amazing college essay. And we're really lucky to have him here because Ethan knows this topic inside and out. He's really nationally recognized, I would say, as a college essay expert and speaker. He's written a book on this, College Essay Essentials. He has online courses that he walks students through and coaches who help students work through their essays. So he's really got a ton of expertise to bring to this topic and can help us understand how to approach this in a really effective way. And I just love everything about his approach. But we actually had him on the series last year, for those of you who were with us last year, and everyone had really great response to the interview. So I'm super excited that we've got him back to cover some topics from a slightly different perspective than we did last time and dive into this process. But you'll see why everyone loves him once we get started. So thank you, Ethan, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Thanks for having me
Not
back.
to set too high of a bar or put you up on a pedestal too much. But
Well, it's like you're gonna love my friend. You should totally be my friend. So I guess it's okay.
it'll be great. So I'm excited to talk about this because, like I said in our intro there, I think a lot of students are approaching the essay in maybe not the best way because they've really not been trained how to approach it. This is not something they've learned to do in school. It's very different from the kind of essay writing that students would typically do. So if they haven't learned and they're not familiar with how to approach a college essay, what mistakes do you find that they make?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes students think that it's like an English paper. And so they will put their thesis first, and then they will offer supporting evidence, and then they will have a conclusion where they're repeating their central claim. And I actually find that, so this is one mistake, is like thinking of it as an English paper. I actually find that the thesis is better coming close to the end or having an implied thesis. Now, that's going to sound kind of abstract to y'all, but an example of that might be like, if, for example, in my essay, I was writing about a future career that I want to have. Let's say I'm really committed to being a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And if I say at the start of my essay, I want to be a doctor, and then I'm like, and there are 3 reasons why, and I give those 3 reasons, and then each paragraph is, that's going to be super clear, but it's going to be kind of boring, right? If, on the other hand, I'm telling these different stories from my life, and then somewhere close to the end, I say, and that's why I'm interested in becoming a doctor. It's like, oh, cool. It kind of ties it all together. There's sort of this, it ends up feeling surprising but inevitable, is what I like to say about a great ending. And so that's one. I've got a bunch. Another one is, I think sometimes students, not only on their personal statement, so just to clarify for folks, your personal statement is like the main essay that's like 650 words. I'm doing this because it's 1 page.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes out to most of the private schools you're applying to. And that also can be reused for scholarships. So there's the personal statement, and there are like supplemental essays that ask about, what's an extracurricular activity that's been important to you, for example, or why do you want to attend this college? And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I find that students on their extracurricular essay, especially, they'll choose a common topic, and they'll make common connections, and then they'll use common language. And so let me explain what I mean by that. So a common topic might be like basketball or violin or the mission trip essay, right? And then the common connections are basically like, what are values that are often connected to that sport or instrument or kind of service trip. So for the basketball essay, it might be like discipline, hard work, and perseverance. And that's what they focus on in the essay. And then at the end, it's like common language. It's something like, I realize that, leadership, in order to be a real leader, you have to, be able to trust others. And it's like, yeah, okay, we've kind of heard that before. So an uncommon, standout essay is probably going to take those common things and go uncommon. So an uncommon topic when possible, an uncommon connections and uncommon language. And, that might sound something like, and uncommon topics are not like usual, but like, let me think of, there's a student that I met a couple years ago who was really interested in playing musical instruments, but he played like the santur. Now, I know as soon as I say that, people are like, well, what the heck is a santur? Well, it's like
I was thinking that exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's a classical Persian instrument. Now, this exercise that I'm giving you doesn't have to be. So let's just say that, actually, let me tell you about the santur essay, and then I'm going to tell you how it applies.
Okay.
So what he chose to focus on, the connections were not like discipline, hard work, and perseverance, but it was like, how had this musical instrument helped him connect with his family more? And how had it shown him that social change was possible through music? And how had he used music to help others? And so he's kind of using the instrument in unusual ways. And what I tell students is, like, even if you're writing about basketball, instead of writing about discipline, hard work, and perseverance, show me some uncommon ways that basketball has impacted you. Like, give me a sense of like what you've learned about, your own boundaries, like when to say no, or when does democracy, like getting input from everyone, when is that not actually the best idea? And when are there some times when you actually just need to like go for it, make a decision, just for the sake of time or for the sake of like modeling what leadership looks like. So those are some like maybe potential uncommon connections. So I ask students to like think about what are the common connections, and then do like a prescribed burning, which is like, in forests when they're like getting ready to like prepare them, in the season, they'll burn certain trees so that their like new growth happens. So that's what I ask students to do when it comes to like their values, is like, think about what are the common things that other people are going to say, and then don't talk about those. Like, give me some uncommon connections. And then uncommon language is kind of bonus points, but it's like, say it in a way that you haven't heard before. In fact, if something that you've written in your essay sounds like it could be in somebody else's essay, cut it and see what's another way that you could phrase that. I've got more. You want more mistakes?
Yes, I would love more mistakes.
I'll go through these a little faster, but like sometimes I think students, they pick a topic and they stick with it, when actually it's maybe not the best topic for them. So I say to students, like, the best time to change your essay topic is right now, because right now you have more time to work on that new topic than you'll ever have, right? Just in terms of the way time seems to work.
How would you know that you should change? I'm curious about that, because sometimes writing is hard. I mean, maybe I'll just say all the time writing is hard, because it's a creative process, and it's tough. You get stuck, you hit roadblocks, you say, oh, I don't know what I want to say there. I don't like how this is coming across. So how do you distinguish between I'm having trouble expressing myself creatively versus this is just not the right topic for me?
Yeah, great question. I'm gonna jump forward talking about structure a little bit. Sure. And it'll, I think, contextualize it. So sometimes students will decide to write about a challenge in their essay, or a series of challenges, and there's a particular structure that I think works well for that, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then there are some students who don't write about challenges. They just want to talk about like different parts of themselves and find something that connects them all. And so for the students who are interested in writing about a challenge, which I call this the narrative structure, and there's an exercise, this is the first of several exercises that I'll mention, called the feelings and needs exercise, which will, Maggie will give a link to you too, but you can also Google it, feelings and needs exercise, that will help a student get a sense of like what a challenge meant to them and how it was meaningful. And if after you've gone through that exercise, you sense, you know what, I don't know that I've really worked through this yet, then that's a signal that, not to say that don't write about it, like potentially write about it, but if there's like only a couple weeks left before you're going to apply, it might take you longer to process that challenge than you have time. So it might be a good thing to consider this other structure, which I'll talk about in just a second. Sometimes also when students are writing about a challenge, they'll feel themselves kind of forcing it. Like they read a great essay where someone went through like an incredibly trying time, and then they learned a lot of stuff about themselves, and they're like, wow, what's the toughest thing I've ever been through? And it might be, not that interesting of a story. And they feel like, I need to make this more meaningful, but it feels like they're forcing it. That's another signal to try another structure. So the other structure that I recommend is called the montage structure. And it basically involves coming up with a list of 4 to 6 different parts of yourself and jumping around in space and time to figure out, well, okay, what thread is going to connect these? So a metaphor for this is like beads on a necklace. And so what you're looking for first, and I'll give some ideas for how to do this in just a second, is we're looking for like interesting beads that might go on the necklace. Like, I'm really committed to community in my life, And that's an important part of me. And I manifest that through like my involvement in theater. And then I've also got this thing that I'm really interested in about writing. Like writing is something that's really meaningful to me. It gives me a place where I can learn what I think. And so I might have the writing piece. So I've got writing and theater. And then I've got this other part of me. It's like, I really want to help others. And so the question becomes, okay, I've got theater, I've got writing, and I've got helping others. How do these things connect? And so what we're doing is called thread finding. And for students who are trapped in a, in a particular, challenge, try this thread finding thing. Generate some ideas about what your beads could be, and then figure out what's a potential way to connect these. Now, sometimes students will kind of get lost in finding a thread that like doesn't seem to connect them. They'll think that it's like, oh, maybe the thing that connects them all is like language or communication. And it's about the power of words. And they'll try an essay for a while, and they find that the power of words thing is just, it's not clicking for them somehow. And so then it's like, okay, I don't need to throw out theater and writing and, what was the third one? Whatever it was, helping others. I don't need to throw out the beads. I just need a new thread. And so if your thread somehow isn't working, try switching out the thread. So that's the somewhat abbreviated version of like some signals that you might want to switch topics. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I see with students, a mistake that they make when they're writing about challenges, is that they often focus so much on the challenge that they don't get into like what they did about it and what they learned. So if you're writing about a challenge, consider this budget, like 1/3 challenge, 1/3 what I did about it, and 1/3 what I learned. Oftentimes students, especially in the first draft, will do like 500 or 550 words on, the challenge. And then at the end, it's like, but I'm working through it. And you're kind of like left feeling like, oh my gosh, is this person going to be okay? Or I get a sense that you had a challenge, but not what you did about what you learned. And if you think about this is kind of an answer to the question of like, what are colleges looking for? Like, they're not just looking for people who've been through tough stuff, right? You don't get into college because your parents got divorced. It's like, how did you metabolize that experience? In other words, how did you process it? What did you do about it? And because what colleges are looking for is, besides can you write, they're looking for, are you going to bring valuable skills, qualities, and I like to say like inner resources to campus? Like, what are you going to contribute to the campus? And there are a few different ways that I think they're of bringing that into an essay, which we can get into in a little bit. But essentially, just talking about a challenge isn't going to get us there.
Well, what's interesting about that to me, and I've seen students get stuck in this trap as well, is that they're kind of going with what's easier for them to do. I think it's easier to talk about the challenge because you lived it, and it's easier to just describe the challenge than it is to really get into who am I and how did I interpret that and how did I grow from that and how has that changed me as a person. I feel like students have a really hard time writing about themselves. So I'll see students, writing an essay, for example, about their family, how their family impacted them, and the whole essay is about your grandfather. And I learned a ton about your grandfather, and he sounds awesome. And I would love to admit him to the college. Right? But I want to figure out if I'm going to admit you. And they're nowhere in the essay. I'm curious if that's another mistake you see students making just in general is not spending enough time on reflection, not even in a challenge essay, but just period.
Sure. Well, and before I answer that, I'll say that this is kind of answering that, but it's like, I think that it sometimes is really tough to write about current challenges. So, if I were to ask you, Maggie, like, what's a challenge that you faced like 5 or more years ago that has like taught you a lot? Like, you'd probably have some stuff to say about it because you processed it. But if I was like, Maggie, what's something you're dealing with like this week? Then it's like, well, if I'm really honest, it's like this thing with
you haven't had time to deal with it yet. Mm-hmm.
It's hard to look back on it. So again, I encourage students to like write about it because it can be good for your soul. But like for your college essay, and sometimes students like end up, for example, if they're writing about a learning difference or mental health issues, it ends up sounding like this is all of who they are. Mm-hmm. And I've had students get to the point in the process where like, it just sounds like I'm just a person with learning differences. And I'm like, is that true? And it's a loaded question, obviously. It's a leading question. And they're like, no. And I'm like, so what are the other parts to you? And they'll start to talk about those other things. And I'm like, and that's when I kind of shift them over to montage. And it's like, well, let's talk about those other parts. 2 other ones that I see students make is oftentimes they try to like pack in everything to their personal statement. So they try and get in, the bad grade that they got sophomore year. And, here's why I didn't take, AP physics. And there are all these things. And there's a section on the application called the additional information section. I'm going to reference this like blank gray space on the wall. So this is like a sound thing to like absorb sound, so it's not super echoey in this room. But the additional info section is basically like a giant blank space on the application where you can put in other parts of you, things that you might want to express or explain. And it's got to be pretty informational, but you don't need to explain every single part of yourself in the personal statement. That's what that section's for. Second resource, if you Google how to write the additional info section, there's a blog post that has like 12 different things that you could potentially put in there.
Good. Thank you for that. Because I was just about to ask you, what are the things you should put in there and how do you format that? So, okay, we'll lead everybody to that resource, how to write that additional information section.
I'll give you a couple, like in terms of format and tone, it's super straightforward. Bullet points are great. If you had to drop volleyball and, because of like you had back issues, right? I had to drop volleyball sophomore year because of chronic back issues. I ended up becoming, assistant manager on the team. And we, went 14-6 last year. I mean, you don't need to like include that much information, but it's like, and I was happy, it was painful to see that we went 0-14 the following year with me on the sidelines. I'm not saying like get super jokey in that section, but just including a little bit of context. I like to give them more information rather than less.
Even just knowing it's bullet point information rather than a full-on essay is really helpful, because that's not really clearly stated. If you look at that part of the application, I don't think it's super clear that they are looking for what exactly they're looking for, basically in that section. So that's not a full essay like what we're talking about here for the personal statement. Is very, very different.
It is, and it's kind of like if you're having a conversation with somebody, or you're having like you had an interview, and they're like, anything else? And you're like, oh yeah, one more thing. It's like that. It's as opposed to like, let me sit down and tell you like a whole separate second personal statement. These admissions readers are reading super fast. So in order to, respect their time and make sure that, that you're following the directions, because they haven't asked for an essay in there. Straightforward is great. And then another mistake I'll see sometimes is students don't spend as much time as they could or should on the why this college essay. And this is a super important one. Sometimes some schools, in fact, have gone on the record publicly as saying that like it's more important than the personal statement.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And I don't want to mention the schools because then everybody's going to like, and also that school might change its opinion from year to year.
It might. But what are they looking for? Why is that essay so important to them?
Yeah. So colleges are interested in, for better and for worse, in something called yield. And this is going to get a little technical for a second, but yield is basically if the University of Michigan, just to pick an example, accepts, 10 students and only 2 students say yes, that looks bad. It's kind of like you've had a party and you invited 10 people and only 2 people showed up. And as a result, the US News and World Report rankings, which are really problematic, and if you want to know why, just Google your annual reminder to ignore the US News and World Report rankings. It's a bad way to create a list just based on brand name or rankings. But the schools kind of track their rankings because a lot of people care about them still. And yield, which is to say how many students end up actually enrolling at the school once the acceptances have gone out, is tied to rankings. So why is this important for you? Well, if a school is like trying to track their yield, they need to know who loves them. Like who's going to actually come to our school if we accept them. And so they have different ways that they track that. Now, one of the ways they track that is the why us essay, right? So when they're asking for you 500 words, for example, at Michigan, like why do you love Michigan? Have you done your research? Are there specific things that you think would be a match? Because they're also looking to see, is this a student who's going to like really take advantage of our resources? And are we going to be able to retain the student? They're going to stay for 4 years, or have they just kind of just thrown their hat in the ring and just been like, oh, I'm just going to click a box and apply to a bunch of schools. So beyond that, beyond this way of tracking demonstrated interest, there are lots of other ways that schools track demonstrated interest. And another resource, if you Google demonstrated interest college essay guy, there's a whole big post on like 14 ways that schools track demonstrated interest and how you can sensibly, because not all schools do it, like the Ivies don't do it. They don't care. Harvard doesn't care that you care about them, right? But a school like Bates does care. And if you want to, if you're interested in Bates College, getting on their email list and making sure you open their emails, going to a college fair if there's one near you, maybe reaching out to the rep to get more information. These are all things that let the college know that this is a student who's like legit interested. The other way is like, are you applying early? That's another big one, early decision or early action. So I know that's a lot of
Yeah,
information.
we'll post that below as well. But that's good to know that that YS essay is a important indicator, and that's something that they're looking for. So what would be, in the spirit of mistakes, what would be a thing maybe not to do in the YS essay? And when I say YS essay, can we also clarify for parents who aren't as familiar with the lingo here what we mean by that? How would you know it's the YS essay?
And so what it sounds like is, you know, why do you want to attend the University of Michigan? You know, some version of that. Or, you know, why Bates, right? Or why Union College, you know? And you basically have to give a series of reasons. Now, this is actually, as opposed to a personal statement, is a thesis-based essay. And your thesis is, you and me are a perfect match. Here's why. Okay. So don't be afraid to put your thesis at the top. I believe such and such school is the perfect place for me because of its strengths in law, media, and, you know, Division III lacrosse, you know, whatever it is. And then you've got a little map for your, you know, your why this college essay. So it's called the why this college essay, right? Oftentimes students will talk about things like, you know, they'll mention rankings. They'll be like, it's because it's you're a well-ranked school, which is just kind of, you know, tacky. They'll say, you know, because, you know, they've got you got sports, but it's like, well, how many schools have sports, right? Or they'll mention like study abroad, but like every school has study abroad. So it's getting into the nooks and crannies of what are those things, not only that the school has that make it unique, but that are specifically connected back to you. So a simple model, and you can, like, on a blank sheet of paper, you just split it into two and you make a list of like what I want and then what they have. Okay. And for like for a 500-word why us essay, I think you can do, you know, 10 reasons. Sometimes students will do like 1 or 2 reasons and kind of try and stretch it out. Pack in a bunch of reasons. And here's a simple formula. A, you know, what I want, and plus B, what you have, you know, is equal C, like you know, we are a perfect fit. And so you're basically just weaving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It'll be nice to like theme your paragraphs. So the first paragraph might be, for example, on here's a specific academic thing connected to the major. Well, actually, the first paragraph might be your thesis, which is like, I want to major in this at your school, and I believe you're the perfect place. Also, given you know that it's a minor in this, that I can minor in neuroscience, right? So second paragraph might be like, here's a specific major, a thing connected to my major that I'm interested in, and here's the specific professor that I want to work with, and here's what I hope to get out of that class. Super detailed. Then you might give another academic thing that's like something else that's unique that the school offers. Like maybe it's one of the only schools that offers speaking Latin. And it's like, I want to take a speaking Latin course because of my interest in So again, connecting it back to you. Then you might get into like extracurriculars. I think another mistake students sometimes make is they'll start with like their weakest reason. Like they'll be like, I can't wait to, you know, and they'll mention like some coffee shop like in the town nearby. And it's like, is that really a great reason to like put all of your chips into this, you know, for 4 years? So putting your strongest, probably academic reasons first, and then getting into the extracurriculars and what I call like the miscellaneous extracurriculars, which is like, oh, and I'm also interested in dance, and I'm interested in maybe taking a photography course and this documentary thinking course. Like that seems cool too. Your closing can be super short, straightforward, or you don't even need it if it's a really short one, because sometimes these are like 150 words. So that's my brief crash course on the YS.
Oh my gosh. And we'll give people more resources on that too. I know you've got a great resource on your site as well. And that's a great place to get started because it is almost the polar opposite of the personal statement. And I'm curious too, since we're on kind of the topic of supplemental essays, because this is where that YS essay would come in to the picture. It's usually one of those supplements that the college is saying, please give us, you know, answer these 3 questions or these 4 questions. And one of them is going to be why our college. What about the other supplemental essays? Are there any mistakes you see students making there, things they should be thinking about that they don't often?
Yeah. So the main ones, the major ones. So just to clarify, I think what you said is really clear, but just so that folks know, like many schools will have a personal statement, but not all of them. And so it's really important to look on that school's either website or on the Common Application is where most schools are to see what's required. There's also a really cool Chrome extension called if you search CIALFO, CIALFO Chrome extension, that will basically is a little thing that you can get into your Chrome browser that populates with all the different supplemental essays. And it's really cool. So you could go to the Common.
That is cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to like go into the Common App and like hunt where it says like questions, and sometimes it's under essays. And anyway,
additional information, right? It's a little bit hard to find these extra essays sometimes.
And like the best place to go is going to be the school's website, like in terms of like the most official, most recent information. But usually pretty quickly Common App has it, and usually pretty quickly the C Alpha Chrome extension has it. So you've got your personal statement and you've got your supplemental essays. Big picture, sometimes students will see their supplemental essay list. Like once they'll like put all their schools on one, and I encourage students to do this, put them on a spreadsheet and then put the different prompts. I call this creating your college essay tracker. Put all the prompts that you're going to need to write for all the schools you're applying to. So let's say you're writing for Michigan and it's like, I'm going to do my personal statement. And then I'm also going to do a YS. I'm going to do an essay that's 250 words on a community that I'm a part of. And then Michigan also asks, at least up until last year, we'll see if they change it. What's an extracurricular activity? Which one would you continue doing if you could? And so that's 3 additional essays. Now, what sometimes happens is when students have all of their schools and all of their essays, they just they'll keep scrolling and scrolling and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I have like 50 essays to write. And the biggest mistake that students make, I think, is they write 50 separate essays. But pretty quickly, you'll learn that a lot of these are going to overlap more than you think. So let me give an example. If, for example, this is an obvious one, but like, let's say Michigan asks, what's a community that you're a part of? And you write that essay. And let's say you're applying to like a school like Harvey Mudd. And Harvey Mudd's asking you to describe, just tell us something else about you that we haven't learned yet, right? And that's 500 words. Well, that's a cool opportunity to overlap them, right? So write a 500-word version on this community that you're a part of, use it for Harvey Mudd, and then shorten it to 250 and use it for Michigan. As long as that, and then that's going to kind of help you focus your energy and time and help you, work in a complementary way to your personal statement. So that can be a really, really good thing to do. Once you start to do that with several schools, you might find that there are only like 4 or 5 major topics that you need to write on, or maybe even 2 or 3 major topics. Like it might be you have your personal statement and then you've got like an extracurricular activity that's really meaningful to you that you're able to reuse that essay for a bunch of different prompts. And there was a student that I worked with like 3 years ago, and his one hiking essay worked for 12 different prompts.
Wow.
So yeah, that was like the most that I'd seen. But he was like, when we were scroll through the list, and sometimes students will color code it like, okay, the hiking essay is going to go for this, 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 this. My baseball essay is going to go for this, 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 and this. My piano essay is going to go for this, this, and this. But then you've only got a baseball, piano essay, and then your personal statement, and you're good to go, because you can pretty much, and then you're going to have to probably do a why us. So that's probably the most important advice that I can give y'all. And just to track it again, 5th resource, if you look up this college essay tracker, it's a really simple spreadsheet that I put together. You can just Google how to create a great college list, and there's like a little spreadsheet tracker and a podcast connected to it to show you how to do that. And it also has a link to that C Alpha tracker as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that up. I love spreadsheets and tracking and color coding. So you're speaking my language right now. Okay. This is fantastic.
And I just want to speak to students and who do not feel that way. Like I am not actually a spreadsheet person, but when I was trying to figure out how to organize this stuff, a spreadsheet did end up being simpler than like a long Google Doc. But you can definitely, if you're a spreadsheet phobic listening to this, you can create your own doc. But I would say just do have one place that you're organizing all the information. I find that spreadsheets are nice because they've got columns and
there's 2 dimensions. So you can see the schools here and then the essays here. And it's helpful. Take a look at the resource. Let's just say, even if you're afraid of spreadsheets, go download it, look at it, and then you can decide if it looks like a good format. And if not, you can change it up, but at least you know the information you need to be tracking. So, and that's a great advice, because you're right. If you write 50 different essays, you're not going to have as high quality of writing for those.
Or a life.
Or a life.
Have a life either.
And we do want you to have a life and not be stressed out and overwhelmed and just hate college by the time you're in, because you spend so much time on it. So that's a great input.
The other thing I'll say is so we've talked, in terms of the supplements, we've talked about YSs. And the other main supplement that most students, I think, if they're applying to highly selective schools, need to write is that extracurricular activity essay, which is the one that I mentioned at the start in terms of like common, uncommon topic when possible, uncommon connections, and uncommon language. And that principle, that like structure, is going to apply to pretty much any of the supplemental essays that you write. So that's my advice for like, those 2 things are my advice for like all supplemental essays. There are specifics that we could get into, but it just depends on what that supplemental essay is. like for short answers, like here's something that comes up pretty often is short answers. For the short answers, go ahead and use all the space that's allotted to you. So it might be that it's like you could answer with like a 1-word answer, like what's your favorite food? But if you tell USC that your favorite food is pizza, it's like, are you blending in or standing out there? So give us a little more information, a little more context. You could just name the movie. So again, some other highly selectives will have short answers. You could just name the movie, but if you gave us just a few words about why that movie was meaningful to you, it's kind of like an advent calendar around the holidays where you open up like a little window and you like go, oh, this is kind of cool. So each of these short answers is another little window that we're opening up, seeing, into you. And you can almost, I'm going to mix my metaphors. It's almost like a keyhole. And the more context you give there, the bigger the keyhole is and the more that we're going to be able to see inside to you, and in particular, your values. So if you can Google values, sixth resource, Google values exercise, college essay guy. And there's this big menu of values. As you're doing your short answers, just go, okay, for this short answer, which value am I revealing? For this short answer, what value am I revealing, right? You can also use that. This is like when you've written some drafts and go, okay, in my personal statement, which values are coming through already? Because then you can make sure that like in your why us essay, that other values are coming through, and that in your short answer, that other values are coming through. Not because you want to have 1,000 different values, because there could be some common ones that establish like common themes or threads, but just in terms of getting like lots of variety and information. Because if you find that like why us and your main essay and your short answers are all showing like your hard work and discipline, it's like, we got it. And we actually already got it because we saw that you had a 3.7. So we knew that you were a hard worker. What else? And the values menu can help you think about what else, because it's kind of hard to come up with values, I think, on the spot.
That's a great point. Well, and really what you're sharing here about the values and the keyhole and how you're seeing parts of the student, I think there's a bigger picture point here that I'd love to make sure people are getting, that what you're looking for with the college essay in general is not facts. We're not looking for what did you do, when did you do it, how did it work. We're looking at who you are. And I think that's something maybe students need to keep in mind. And I'm curious, what you're talking about, the values exercise, all of that. How do you help students think through what part of themselves they might want to show on their main personal statement that's going to go out to all the schools versus the values and the character traits and all of that they might want to highlight on the supplemental essay? Because I feel like there's so many different directions. It's hard to sum up who am I in one 650-word essay. I think a lot of students find that very daunting and don't even really know where to begin.
Right. So a couple different thoughts on that. One is, and resources 7 and 8. One is, in terms of when you're trying to generate a topic, I wouldn't worry too much about the prompt. That's, I think, another mistake that students, they become overly obsessed with the personal statement prompt. And they're like, it needs to like answer the prompt, because my English teacher has been like screaming that at me for the last 2 years, But actually with your personal statement, I find that generating through a couple different exercises, a list of potential topics can help you decide, do you want to write the narrative challenges-based essay or not? And so one exercise that I really love is called the essence objects exercise, which we talked a little bit about last year, but basically involves creating a list of objects that represent different parts of who you are, like deeper qualities or relationships or memories. And an example of that might be like my friendship bracelet. Did I talk about my friendship bracelet last year?
No, I don't think so.
I might have been wearing a different one. So my wife makes a friendship bracelet for me every year. It's my birthday gift from her. And yeah, it's cool. She weaves it, herself, and then it kind of wears off, and then she like reties it on my wrist. It's like her cue to make a new one. And then around September, she ties, a new one. So to me, as I thought about it, I was like, oh, this represents my relationship with my wife. But it also represents like the sort of a metaphor around like how, relationships like sometimes will change and they'll sometimes like wear away, and you kind of have to like reweave that connection. And so this represents my relationship with her, my relationship with my best friend. I would also put in there like barbecue sauce, because I just love barbecue sauce. I would put in there Saucony shoes, because I'm usually wearing Saucony shoes. So these don't all have to be like super deep. It's like, what do people associate with you? I mean, this is like comfort. So these don't like Saucony shoes don't look fancy, but they represent me like loving comfort. So what I start to do is I do this exercise. It only takes like 10 minutes. Is I start to generate a list of like essences for who I am. And then another exercise that I really love is called the 21 details exercise. Ding, resource 8, where students basically create a huge list of all these qualities that you're interested in. That not that you're interested in showing to colleges, that's a separate exercise, but that are, you know, meaningful to you. So it might be like on my 21 details list, it's like 21 random facts about myself. Like I moved around, like I lived in 13 houses before I like went to high school. And I love, let's see what else. I speak fluent Spanish. I do voiceovers also. People don't often know that about me. I love to do silly voices. I can do almost any accent. So I'm just listing random things about myself. But when you start getting into like 15, 16, 17, they start to get a little weird, which is cool. That's where like the magic starts to happen. So what ends up happening is you have these essence objects and you got these 21 details. When you're trying to brainstorm topics, you start to go, oh, I do have like a lot of stuff. You're not starting with none. I think that's the point that a student of mine made this earlier this year. She worried that she had nothing to write about, and she actually found through great brainstorming exercises that she did have a lot to write about. And so I just want to encourage students to, before they begin like officially writing, that you do a lot of good like quality brainstorming, like probably at least an hour, at least, you know, to generate stuff. Another exercise, resource 9, is like everything I want colleges to know about me. And if you just on a blank sheet of paper, just make a big list of everything that you want colleges to know. That's going to give you now a third set of stuff. You've got your essence objects, your 21 details, everything you want colleges to know about me. And then you've got like your values exercise, a ton of stuff. And then if you go to I think the first resource I mentioned was this feelings and needs exercise. These are all the resources I give to students before I work with them. So they create all these. And then in that first brainstorming session, which you can do with anybody, you know, you could do this with a friend or a parent or, you know, somebody that, a counselor, someone that you trust. It's good to do it with somebody who, you know, has some sense of what colleges are looking for and they have experience, so that they can help you kind of spot cliches. But you can start to generate ideas, and you'll already have generated a lot of ideas. Then it's really about curating and deciding, okay, have I found a challenge that really feels like my deepest story? If not, it's okay. Let's look for some beads and figure out, can we find a thread to sort of string these together? So
I love that you're emphasizing all this deep work, this thought, this brainstorming that goes into it before they pick a topic, because I find that what often students are doing is they're doing the opposite, or even parents will do that. I'll hear a parent say, oh, you need to write a college essay. Well, write about this thing that you've done for 6 years, or this essay. And they just jump to the thing that you're going to focus on in the essay and don't really start that on that foundational of a level. They're not getting down to who am I? What do I want to share with the colleges? What are my values? They're not really thinking through that. And so then the essay ends up feeling a little bit shallow, or a little bit just not really as much of a revealing who they truly are. And I think that's what I love about your process, is you're really getting students to think through this. And I find that's a value no matter what your essay turns out to be. Just the fact that you've thought through who you are and what's important to you and what your values are. What a wonderful thing to do as a human being, especially at this phase in your life where you're trying to figure out what is my career and what college do I want to attend. And this deep thinking is valuable no matter what.
It's the whole reason I do this work. Like the college essay stuff is just the one of the like the thing on the door, right? It's like when students walk in, they're like, oh, this is like actually kind of deep. And it's like, yeah, it is kind of deep. And to answer your earlier question about like, how do they then decide what goes there and what goes in the supplements? I like students to begin thinking about their personal statement first. And what'll happen is some of the ideas that don't end up making it, that starts to create supplemental essay topic stuff. But I find if students kind of think about their supplemental essay topics first, then it's sort of like, well, but what is going to be my main thing? And so the reason I think it's a good idea to think about the main thing, because you can kind of pick those 5 different beads. Or if you've seen the movie Inside Out, it's like, what are the islands of your personality that are, you know, fueled by these core memories? You know, Hockey Island and Friendship Island and Honesty Island and Goofball Island. Like, these create the paragraphs of your essay, and then you know what's there. So, you know, and it's going to be big. I'm going to put it in the middle of the screen for a second. And then you can go, okay, well, hockey and, you know, my silly side and my family and my honesty side are all there. Okay, well, what's here? You know what? My volunteer side isn't there. So that's going to make for a great supplemental essay. You can do it the other way around, but I find that it's good to, anyway, generating that content is going to help you map out, you know, both of them anyway. So in other words, what I'm saying is like those exercises that I mentioned aren't just about generating personal statement topics. They're also going to help generate what goes in the activities list and what goes in the extracurricular activity essay and what goes in the additional info.
Great. Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because it suggests this is something you want to start with early on. This is not an afterthought. Please don't do your
Nice
whole
segue.
application
Love
and
that.
everything else. Please focus on this first. So I am curious when you think students should be starting this essay writing process, because I find it's something a lot of students who are applying really underestimate and don't acknowledge how much work it's going to be and how much time it's going to take. And then there's only so good of a job you can do with writing if you're throwing it together the night before. So I'm assuming not the night before, but what's realistic? What do you
Two
find with
nights
your
before.
students?
2 nights before. Wait till 48 hours when you're just like, and then just drink a bunch of Mountain Dew and then just go for it. No.
We're not serious. Don't take that as advice.
Disclaimer. Ethan is kidding right now. Okay, so the timeline that I think is, now I'm going to say this to you, and I don't want you to stress out if you're not following this timeline. Like if you're watching this video and it's like a month before the deadline, right now you have more time than you'll ever have. So
now is always better than later.
Now is a good time to start. I think if students like are watching this, say, months before the deadline, I think summer is a great time to start. Mm-hmm. And I think writing your personal statement, starting to like research, definitely have your school list, like be working on that, figuring out which schools to apply to. And I think you can start a Why Us essay if it's required. Even though those aren't officially released until August, I think you can kind of start doing that research over the summer so that by the time you walk into fall, you want to, I think, have as much done as possible, because you're going to have your heaviest course load, assuming you're sort of in traditional school model. Mm-hmm. You're going to have maybe standardized tests if you're applying to schools that require them. You're going to be having your most leadership responsibilities, and you're going to be most excited about most things because you've like been, building all this energy. So I don't want college, I don't want you to be starting the process then, because I've seen students like really stress out. So, so I'd say summer is a great time to start. And then, I like to have students done with all of their applications before the early deadlines, which are usually in November, because then they can enjoy the holidays with their family, in the winter break. So, so that's my advice, is to like start in summer, not start early. Like you don't need to write your essays like sophomore year. Like start writing essays right after June, July. That's a great time. Try to get as much done as you can by August. And then working on the supplements, August, September, October, try and get everything done. And so I say this because sometimes students will apply to an early school and they'll put all their chips in the early basket. And they'll be like, I'm going to apply to Northwestern and I'm going to apply early, and they'll only work on Northwestern stuff. And then they hear back from Northwestern December 15th, they didn't get in, or they got deferred. And they're like, and then they got 2 weeks to fill out all the rest of their applications. So it's just a super stressor that I don't want more students to have to go through. So I would just encourage you to do that work as though you're not going to get into your early school. Okay.
That is great advice, and will be much less stressful, especially over the holidays. That's kind of the worst time. You've just had a whole stressful semester. You finally got off for the holiday break, and then you realize you've got 12 essays to write because you did not get into your early school. Please don't do that to yourself.
And there are people listening that are totally going to do that, and they're totally going to put it off. And just know that we said this, and you have, roots and wings. You have
yes.
our advice on that.
And you'll be okay. But this is why we work with our students on time management. This is why this is important. So I'm glad you're advocating starting early, because that's so important to me. So thank you. This has been so interesting. Everybody who's been watching and thinking, oh, resources there, I think, did we get to 9 by the end? There was 8 or 9. So we're going to hunt those down and put them for you below the video so that you don't have to go scouring the internet for them. We will find them and we'll post them so that you have them. And that's going to include a lot of great information for you all. We're also going to put below some information about how to get a discount on some of the online courses that Ethan does, where he goes into even more depth on all this information and really walks you through the process. So we'll put that information below too, so you can get a discount on those as well. And then we talked a little bit about the Why Us guide. That is something also that we're going to include for those of you who have the success package already from this series, or if you don't, if you want to get a copy of it, we're going to include the Why Us guide that goes into more information. We started to talk about it, but if you really want to walk through the process, it's a video. Is that right, Ethan?
The Why Us guide is a PDF. It's like a 20-page PDF
okay.
that basically walks you through the do's and don'ts.
That's actually better, because it's all written. You can print it out. You can have it next to you as you're creating your.
You can skim it. It's hard to skim a video, but you can totally skim a PDF.
Yes. I think that's going to be great, actually, because it'll help them make sure that they're hitting the right things, which, as you said, that essay, for some schools, they've even said that's more important than your personal statement. So make sure that you grab a copy of that if you have not already. And thank you so much for joining us. As always, I learned a ton from you today, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'll see you all soon. Bye.